In a quiet corner of the world, far away from the noise and lights of big cities, there was a small settlement called Willow Creek. It wasn't much to look at, just a cluster of wooden houses surrounded by fields of wheat that stretched as far as the eye could see. The people who lived there were simple folk, farmers, mechanics, and shopkeepers who had chosen this place because they wanted peace and quiet. They didn't care about fancy technology or fast cars. All they cared about was taking care of their land, their families, and each other. John Harper was one of those people. He had once been a soldier, but after years of fighting in wars that seemed meaningless, he decided to leave it all behind. Now, he spent his days tending to his crops and fixing broken fences. His wife, Laura, helped him around the farm while keeping an eye on their teenage daughter, Emily. Emily was curious about everything, always asking questions and poking her nose into things she probably shouldn't. Still, John and Laura loved her dearly. Then there was Jake Mitchell, the town mechanic. Jake was known for being able to fix anything, no matter how old or broken it was. He worked out of a tiny garage filled with tools, spare parts, and half-finished projects. Willow Creek didn't have much in terms of modern conveniences. There were no skyscrapers, no hover cars, not even a proper internet connection most days. The only way the townsfolk stayed in touch with the outside world was through an old radio tower perched on a hilltop. It crackled and buzzed more often than it worked, but it was enough to let them know if bad weather was coming or if someone needed help nearby. To anyone looking down from above, Willow Creek would seem like the perfect target, isolated, defenseless, and completely unprepared for any kind of attack. And that's exactly why the invaders chose it. High above Earth's atmosphere, hidden among the stars, floated a massive alien warship. Its surface gleamed with polished metal, reflecting sunlight, like a mirror. Inside, Commander Kale stood before a holographic map of the planet below. His eyes narrowed as he studied the image of Willow Creek. "This will do," he said in a voice cold and sharp, like steel scraping against stone. "Begin the operation." Kale was the leader of the Vern Legion, a group feared across galaxies for their brutal efficiency. The Vern weren't just soldiers, they were machines wrapped in living flesh designed to conquer and destroy without mercy. Their mission was simple: invade Earth, test its defenses, and prepare for full-scale domination. But instead of targeting major cities or military bases, Kale had chosen this little farming community as their entry point. Why waste time and resources on heavily guarded areas when you could crush something weak first? Besides, what resistance could a bunch of farmers possibly offer? Back on the ground, life in Willow Creek carried on as usual. John was working on a stubborn plow that refused to start, muttering under his breath as he adjusted the engine. Laura was inside baking bread, the smell wafting through the house and mixing with the fresh scent of hay from outside. Emily sat, cross-legged on the porch, flipping through an old book about astronomy. She liked staring up at the stars at night, wondering if anyone, or anything, was looking back. Jake, meanwhile, was elbow-deep in grease, tinkering with something strange. He'd been building for weeks. No one knew what it was, but Jake assured everyone it would be useful someday. Everything changed in an instant. A deafening roar split the air, shaking the ground beneath their feet. John dropped his wrench and turned toward the horizon, where a thick column of black smoke was rising into the sky. One of the grain silos near the edge of town had exploded, sending chunks of concrete flying in every direction. Panic spread quickly as settlers ran out of their homes, shouting and pointing at the sky. Something unnatural was happening, though. None of them could quite understand what. Laura grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her inside, locking the door behind them. She rummaged through a drawer until she found an old rifle, a relic from her grandfather's hunting days, and loaded it with trembling hands. Outside, John sprinted toward the explosion, his heart pounding. As he got closer, he saw figures moving amidst the chaos. They were tall, taller than any human, encased in shimmering armor that glinted like liquid silver. Each step they took radiated power, and the weapons they carried hummed with energy. These weren't men. They weren't even human. The invaders moved with purpose, scanning the area and firing blasts of blue light that reduced buildings to rubble. John ducked behind a pile of debris as one of the beams narrowly missed him. His mind raced. Who were these creatures? What did they want? More importantly, how could a handful of farmers possibly stand against them? For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm him. Then he remembered something his drill sergeant used to say during training. Fear is natural. Letting it control you isn't. Jake heard the commotion from his garage and immediately sprang into action. He knew whatever was happening wasn't good, and he also knew that sitting around wouldn't help anyone. Grabbing the strange device he'd been working on, he strapped it to his arm and tested the trigger. Sparks flew, followed by a low, whirring sound. It wasn't finished, it might not even work, but it was all he had. With a deep breath, Jake stepped outside, ready to face whatever was coming. As the invaders advanced, destroying everything. In their path, John realized there was no time to call for reinforcements. Even if they tried, the nearest military base was hours away. By then, it would be too late. Willow Creek was on its own, but instead of running or hiding, John made a decision. He would fight, not because he thought they could win, but because giving up wasn't an option. This was his home, his family, his life. If they were going down, they'd go down swinging. Little did the Vern know, they had picked the wrong settlement to mess with. Willow Creek might have lacked high-tech weapons or trained soldiers, but it had something far more valuable: determination. And sometimes, determination can make all the difference. The sound of destruction echoed through Willow Creek as the Vern soldiers continued their relentless assault. Buildings crumbled, crops burned, and the once peaceful fields were now littered with debris. The settlers scrambled in every direction, trying to figure out what was happening and how to survive. Panic filled the air, but amidst the chaos, a few people began to take action. John Harper crouched behind the remains of a tractor, his mind racing. He had never faced anything like this before. Invaders from another world, armed with weapons that could obliterate anything they touched. But he wasn't about to let fear paralyze him. Slowly, carefully, he peeked around the corner to get a better look at the enemy. The Vern moved with precision, their glowing armor making them look almost otherworldly. They weren't just attacking randomly, they were methodical, targeting key structures like the radio tower and the grain silos. It was clear they wanted to cripple the settlement quickly. As John watched, one of the invaders raised its weapon and fired at a nearby barn. The structure exploded in a burst of blue light, sending shards of wood flying in all directions. John flinched but forced himself to stay focused. He knew he couldn't fight these creatures alone, but maybe he didn't have to. If he could, rally the others. If they could work together, there might be a chance, however small, to hold their ground. "Hey!" John shouted, waving to catch the attention of Matt Owens, a retired teacher who lived down the road. Matt was older, with thinning hair and glasses perched on his nose, but he had always been a sharpshooter back in his younger days. Right now he was clutching a hunting rifle, looking unsure of what to do next. "Matt, over here." Matt hesitated for a moment, then hurried over, ducking low to avoid drawing attention. "What's going on, John? What are those things?" "I don't know," John admitted, his voice tight. "But they're not here to make friends. We need to fight back." "Fight back?" Matt repeated, his eyes wide. "With what? They've got weapons that can level buildings." "We use what we've got," John said firmly. "We're farmers, mechanics, and hunters. We know how to improvise. Gather whoever you can find and tell them to meet me by the old water pump. And bring anything you think might help. A gun, a knife, anything." Matt nodded, though doubt lingered in his expression. Still, he turned and ran toward the center of town, shouting for others to follow him. John took a deep breath and glanced around again. Nearby, Sarah Bennett, the town nurse, was helping an injured farmer to his feet. She looked up and saw John watching her. "What's the plan?" she called out, her tone steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We're not letting them take our home," John replied. "Go to the water pump, we'll figure something out." Sarah nodded and started moving, supporting the injured man as best she could. John felt a flicker of hope. If they could stick together, if they could trust each other, maybe they stood a chance. Meanwhile, Jake Mitchell was putting the finishing touches on his makeshift weapon. The device strapped to his arm was bulky and rough-looking, held together with duct tape and sheer determination. Sparks flew as he tested it one last time, adjusting the settings until the hum grew louder. He didn't know if it would work against the invaders, but he wasn't going to sit around waiting to die. Grabbing a wrench for good measure, Jake stepped out of his garage and headed toward the commotion. As he approached the edge of town, Jake spotted one of the Viren soldiers standing near a pile of rubble. The creature's head tilted slightly as if scanning the area for threats. Without thinking, Jake raised his arm and pressed the trigger. A burst of electromagnetic energy shot out, striking the soldier squarely in the chest. The alien staggered, its movements jerky and uncoordinated as if its systems were malfunctioning. For a brief moment it froze, then collapsed to the ground. Jake stared in disbelief. "Holy cow," he muttered under his breath. It actually worked. The noise drew the attention of another Vern soldier, who turned and aimed its weapon at Jake. Reacting quickly, Jake dove behind a ruined wall just as a blast of blue energy scorched the spot where he'd been standing. His heart pounded as he realized how close he'd come to being vaporized. But instead of retreating, Jake gritted his teeth and prepared to fire again. This strange contraption might not be perfect, but it gave him an edge. And right now, that was enough. Back at the water pump, John was gathering a small group of settlers. Matt had returned with a handful of others, including Sarah, who carried a bag filled with medical supplies. There was also Laura, who refused to stay behind despite John's protests. She held the old rifle tightly, her jaw set with determination. Even Emily had snuck away from the house to join them, clutching a slingshot she'd made when she was younger. "You shouldn't be here," John told his daughter sternly. "And leave you to handle this alone?" Emily shot back, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm staying." John opened his mouth to argue, but Laura placed a hand on his arm. "She's stubborn, just like her father," she said with a faint smile. "Besides, we're stronger together." Reluctantly, John nodded. Turning to the group, he spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Listen up. Those things are dangerous, but they're not invincible. Jake's got some kind of weapon that seems to work against them, and we've got numbers on our side. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we don't stop until they're gone." The settlers exchanged nervous glances, but no one backed down. They might not have been soldiers, but they were fighters in their own way. Farmers used to long hours of grueling labor, mechanics skilled at solving problems with limited resources, and parents willing to do whatever it took to protect their families. Together, they formed a ragtag team, united by desperation and defiance. As they prepared to move, Emily suddenly gasped and pointed toward the woods. "Dad, look!" John followed her gaze and saw something glinting in the sunlight. It was partially buried in the dirt, half hidden by weeds and grass. Curious, he walked over and knelt down, brushing away the soil to reveal a strange object. It was metallic, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Though it was clearly alien in origin, it didn't resemble the sleek, polished designs of the Viren soldiers' armor. Instead, it looked ancient, as if it had been left behind centuries ago. "What is it?" Laura asked, peering over his shoulder. "I don't know," John admitted, turning the artifact over in his hands. "But it feels important." The object hummed softly, responding to his touch. A surge of warmth spread through his fingers, and for a split second images flashed in his mind. Stars, planets, and machines unlike anything he'd ever seen. Shaking his head, John tucked the artifact into his pocket. Whatever it was, it might come in handy later. By now, the Viren soldiers had regrouped and were advancing further into the settlement. Their weapons discharged bursts of energy that shattered windows and set rooftops ablaze. The settlers braced themselves, gripping their makeshift weapons tightly. Fear still lingered in their hearts, but so did resolve. This was their home, and they weren't going to let anyone or anything take it from them. John gestured for everyone to spread out, using the terrain to their advantage. Matt climbed onto the roof of a nearby shed, positioning himself for a clear shot. Sarah stayed close to the group, ready to tend to any injuries. Jake moved ahead, firing his electromagnetic weapon whenever an opportunity arose. And John led the charge, clutching a pitchfork like a spear as he charged toward the nearest Vern soldier. The battle was messy and chaotic, far from the organized warfare the Vern were accustomed to. But the settlers fought with everything they had, driven by love for their land and each other. Each strike, each explosion, brought them closer to proving that even the smallest, weakest settlement could stand tall in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle raged on, and the settlers of Willow Creek quickly learned that their greatest strength lay in adaptability. They didn't have advanced weapons or years of combat training, but they had something else: resourcefulness. Each person brought their own skills to the fight, turning ordinary tools into weapons and using the terrain to their advantage. The Vern soldiers, though powerful, were unprepared for such unconventional tactics. John Harper led the charge, his pitchfork becoming an unlikely but effective weapon. He darted between buildings, using walls and debris as cover while closing in on the invaders. His movements were quick and unpredictable, catching the Vern off guard. When one of them fired a blast of energy, John rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. He countered by thrusting the pitchfork forward, striking the soldier's leg. To his surprise, the alien stumbled, its balance disrupted. Though the armor was tough, it wasn't invincible. Nearby, Matt Owens perched on the roof of a shed, aiming, his hunting rifle with steady hands. He had always been a good shot, and now he put those skills to use. Taking careful aim, he fired at the glowing visors of the Vern helmets. The bullets didn't penetrate the armor, but they distracted the soldiers, forcing them to shield their faces. That split second of hesitation gave the settlers precious time to regroup and strike again. Sarah Bennett stayed close to the group, her bag of medical supplies slung over her shoulder. She wasn't a fighter, but she played a crucial role. Whenever someone got hurt, which happened more often than anyone liked, she was there to patch them up. A farmer named Paul had taken a glancing blow from an energy weapon, leaving a nasty burn on his arm. Sarah cleaned the wound and wrapped it tightly, urging him to keep moving. "We need everyone we can get," she said firmly. "Don't stop, now." Jake Mitchell continued to experiment with his electromagnetic device, learning how to maximize its effectiveness. At first, the weapon only stunned the Vern soldiers temporarily. But Jake noticed something important. The longer he held the trigger, the more damage it caused. During one particularly intense moment, he aimed the device at a cluster of 3 soldiers and fired. The burst of energy rippled through their armor, causing all 3 to collapse in unison. Jake let out a whoop of triumph, though he knew better than to celebrate too soon. "This thing's got juice," he shouted to anyone within earshot. "Keep 'em busy and I'll fry 'em." Meanwhile, Emily Harper proved herself to be braver than anyone expected. Armed with her slingshot and a pocket full of sharp stones, she stayed close to her father, ready to help whenever she could. When a Vern soldier cornered Laura near a crumbling wall, Emily acted without hesitation. She loaded a stone into her slingshot, pulled back the elastic band, and released it with surprising accuracy. The stone struck the soldier's visor, cracking it slightly. Startled, the alien turned its attention away from Laura, giving her enough time to scramble to safety. "Nice shot, kid," Laura said, breathing heavily as she rejoined the group. But the settlers weren't relying solely on individual efforts. They worked together, forming strategies on the fly. For example, when a group of Vern soldiers tried to flank them, Matt fired a warning shot to draw their attention. As the aliens moved toward him, Jake unleashed another burst of electromagnetic energy, disabling 2 of them instantly. The remaining soldier hesitated, unsure of what to do next. That hesitation cost it dearly, as John lunged forward with his pitchfork, knocking it to the ground. As the fight wore on, the settlers began to notice patterns in the Vern's behavior. The aliens relied heavily on their technology, which made them predictable once you understood how it worked. Their weapons required a brief charging period before firing, and their armor was vulnerable to certain types of interference, like Jake's device. Even their movements followed a rigid structure, lacking the flexibility of human fighters. These observations gave the settlers an edge, allowing them to anticipate attacks and counter them effectively. Despite their growing confidence, the battle was far from easy. The Vern were relentless, pushing forward even as their numbers dwindled. Buildings continued to crumble and the air grew thick with smoke and ash. Some settlers fell, injured or worse, and the weight of loss hung heavy over the group. But every Time someone faltered, someone else stepped up to fill the gap. It was this unity, this refusal to give up that kept them going. At one point, John remembered the strange artifact he'd found earlier. Pulling it from his pocket, he examined it closely, hoping it might offer some clue or advantage. The object hummed softly, responding to his touch. Images flashed in his mind again, this time clearer than before. He saw diagrams of machines, intricate designs etched into metal surfaces. Then he noticed something peculiar. The patterns on the artifact matched the ones on Jake's electromagnetic device. "Jake," John called out, waving him over. "Take a look at this." Jake frowned as he studied the artifact. "What is it?" "I don't know," John admitted. "But it looks like it's connected to your gizmo somehow. Try combining them." Without wasting a moment, Jake adjusted the settings on his device, aligning it with the artifact. The hum grew louder, vibrating through their hands. Sparks flew, and for a second it seemed like the whole thing might explode. But then the device stabilized, glowing with a bright blue light. Jake grinned. "I think we just upgraded." He aimed the modified weapon at a nearby Vern soldier and fired. This time the blast was stronger, more concentrated. It tore through the alien's armor, sending it crashing to the ground. The settlers cheered, their spirits lifted by this unexpected breakthrough. With the artifact enhancing Jake's invention, they finally had a real chance of turning the tide. Laura, watching from the sidelines, felt a surge of pride. These were her people, her husband, her daughter, her neighbors, and they were proving stronger than anyone could have imagined. Even in the face of impossible odds, they refused to back down. She tightened her grip on the rifle and joined the fray, determined to protect what mattered most. As the minutes ticked by, the Vern began to realize they were losing control of the situation. Their disciplined ranks were breaking down, replaced by confusion and frustration. Commander Kale watched from a distance, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. He hadn't anticipated resistance like this, not from a bunch of farmers and mechanics. His soldiers were trained to crush enemies swiftly, but these humans were different. They adapted, improvised, and fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. Still, Kale wasn't ready to admit defeat. He signaled for reinforcements, ordering his troops to fall back and regroup. The settlers, exhausted but emboldened by their successes, pressed forward, determined to finish what they had started. They knew the fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time since the invasion began, they allowed themselves to hope. Willow Creek might have been small and seemingly insignificant, but it had proven one thing beyond doubt. Even the weakest settlement could become a fortress when its people stood united. And as the battle entered its final stages, the settlers prepared to deliver a message to the invaders, one written in courage, ingenuity, and sheer determination. The tide of the battle had shifted, and the settlers of Willow Creek could feel it. For the first time since the invasion began, they weren't just surviving, they were winning. The Vern soldiers, once confident in their superiority, now moved with hesitation, their ranks disorganized and their attacks less coordinated. The settlers, armed with makeshift weapons and fueled by desperation, had turned the tables on their alien foes. Jake Mitchell stood at the center of the chaos, wielding his upgraded electromagnetic device like a hero from an old storybook. With the artifact enhancing its power, the weapon was devastating. Each blast sent waves of energy rippling through the air, disabling multiple Vern soldiers at once. Jake's hands shook slightly as he fired again and again, but his aim remained steady. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a warrior, fighting to protect his home. Nearby, John Harper led a group of settlers in a daring charge toward the invaders. Armed with whatever they could find, pitchforks, hammers, even broken pieces of fence posts, they closed the distance between themselves and the aliens. The Vern tried to fire back, but the settlers' unpredictable movements made them difficult targets. One soldier raised its weapon, only for Matt Owens to take it down with a well-placed shot to its visor. Another stumbled as Laura Harper swung her rifle like a club, striking it hard enough to knock it off balance. Emily stayed close to her father, her slingshot still in hand. Though she was young, her quick thinking had already saved lives. When a Vern soldier cornered Sarah Bennett while she tended to an injured settler, Emily didn't hesitate. She loaded a sharp stone into her slingshot and let it fly, hitting the soldier's arm with surprising accuracy. The alien flinched, giving Sarah just enough time to duck behind cover. "You're amazing," Sarah said, breathing heavily as she peeked out to check the coast was clear. The settlers' teamwork was remarkable. They communicated without words, relying on instinct and trust to coordinate their attacks. When one person drew the attention of a Vern soldier, another would strike from behind. If someone fell, others rushed to help them up. It was messy and chaotic, but it worked. Slowly but surely, the invaders were pushed back toward the edge of town. Commander Kyle watched the scene unfold with growing frustration. His troops were falling apart, overwhelmed by the relentless determination of these humans. He hadn't expected this level of resistance, not from farmers and mechanics. Every time his soldiers regrouped, the settlers found a way to disrupt them. Their tactics were crude but effective, exploiting every weakness in the Vern's armor and strategy. Kyle signaled for a retreat, ordering his remaining forces to fall back to their landing zone, but the settlers weren't about to let them escape so easily. John noticed the change in the Vern's movements and quickly realized what was happening. "They're pulling out," he shouted to the others. "We can't let them regroup." The settlers pressed forward, chasing the retreating soldiers across the fields. They knew this was their chance to end the fight once and for all. If they could disable the Vern's transport ship, they might trap the invaders on Earth and give humanity a fighting chance against future attacks. Jake sprinted ahead, his electromagnetic weapon glowing brighter than ever. He reached the edge of the field just as the Vern soldiers arrived at their landing zone, where their sleek metallic ship loomed like a monstrous bird ready to take flight. Without hesitation, Jake aimed his device at the ship and fired. The blast struck the vessel's engines, causing sparks to fly and smoke to billow into the air. The ship shuddered, its systems disrupted by the surge of energy. The Vern reacted immediately, turning their weapons on Jake. But before they could fire, John and the others arrived, launching a final assault. Matt took position on a nearby hill, picking off soldiers with precise shots. Laura and Emily hurled homemade grenades made from fertilizer and oil, creating small explosions that forced the aliens to scatter. Even Paul, the farmer who had been injured earlier, joined the fight, swinging a heavy wrench with surprising strength. As the battle intensified, Commander Kale stepped forward, his armor gleaming under the sunlight. Unlike his subordinates, he fought with cold efficiency, wielding a weapon that emitted a continuous beam of energy. He cut through the settlers' defenses, forcing them to retreat temporarily. For a moment, it seemed like the Vern might regain control, but then something unexpected happened. Emily spotted the artifact lying on the ground near Jake, having fallen from John's pocket during the chaos. She grabbed it and ran toward her father, holding it up triumphantly. "Dad, use this!" John hesitated for a split second, then nodded. He combined the artifact with Jake's device, amplifying its power even further. Together, they fired a concentrated beam of energy directly at Kale. The commander staggered, his armor crackling and sparking as the attack disrupted his systems. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes, or at least what passed for fear in a being like him. The other Vern soldiers faltered, unsure of what to do without their leader. Seeing their hesitation, the settlers launched a final push, surrounding the invaders and forcing them to surrender. One by one, the aliens dropped their weapons, their glowing armor dimming as their power sources failed. By the 7th minute of the invasion, silence fell over Willow Creek. The Vern Legion, feared conquerors of countless worlds, had been defeated. Not by armies or advanced technology, but by ordinary people defending what mattered most. Smoke rose from the wreckage of their ship, and the fields were littered with debris. But the settlement still stood, battered but unbroken. John approached Commander Kale, who knelt on the ground, his helmet cracked and his pride shattered. Holding the artifact in one hand, John looked down at the alien leader. "You picked the wrong planet," he said simply. Cale didn't respond, but his posture spoke volumes. Defeat radiated from him, a stark contrast to the arrogance he had shown at the start of the invasion. The settlers gathered around, catching their breath and taking stock of the damage. Some cried, others laughed, and a few simply stared in, disbelief at what they had accomplished. Laura hugged Emily tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "All of you." Matt clapped Jake on the back, grinning despite his exhaustion. "Never thought I'd see the day a busted-up garage project saved us all." Jake shrugged, though there was a hint of pride in his voice. "Told you it'd be useful someday." As the adrenaline began to wear off, the reality of what had happened sank in. Willow Creek had faced an impossible enemy, and won. The victory wasn't just about survival. It was proof that even the smallest, weakest settlement could stand tall when its people refused to give up. Far above, the remnants of the Fern warship hovered uncertainly, waiting for orders that never came. Commander Cale's failure would not be forgotten, and the Empire would undoubtedly seek revenge. But for now, Earth was safe, thanks to the courage and ingenuity of a handful of farmers, mechanics, and families who had chosen to fight for their home. And as the sun set over Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the fields, the settlers began to rebuild. Life would never be the same, but they had proven one thing beyond doubt. No matter how powerful the enemy, unity and determination could overcome anything. The aftermath of the battle left Willow Creek in a state of quiet disbelief. The settlers stood amidst the ruins of their once peaceful town, staring at the smoldering wreckage of alien technology and the defeated Vern soldiers who now sat huddled, together under guard. It was hard to believe that just minutes ago these invaders had seemed unstoppable. Now they were prisoners, their gleaming armor dulled by defeat, their weapons useless against the ingenuity of ordinary people. John Harper walked slowly through the settlement, his boots crunching on broken glass and charred wood. His body ached from the fight and his hands were blistered from gripping the pitchfork so tightly. But he didn't care. He stopped near the remains of the grain silo where it all had begun, and looked out over the fields. Smoke still rose, into the sky, mixing with the golden light of the setting sun. Despite the destruction, there was a strange beauty to the scene, a reminder that life could endure even after devastation. Laura joined him, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "We did it," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "I can't believe we actually won." John nodded, though his expression remained serious. "We held them off this time," he replied. "But it's not over. Those things came here for a reason, and they'll come back if we don't prepare." Laura frowned, glancing toward the captured Vern soldiers. "What do you think they wanted? Why pick us?" "I don't know," John admitted. "Maybe they thought we'd be easy targets, or maybe—" He trailed off, his eyes narrowing as he considered another possibility. Maybe they were testing us, seeing how strong we are before hitting somewhere bigger. The thought sent a chill down Laura's spine, but she forced herself to stay calm. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Willow Creek couldn't go back to being an ordinary farming community. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Jake Mitchell was busy examining the damaged alien ship. With the artifact still glowing faintly in his hands, he circled the vessel, muttering to himself as he inspected its systems. The crash landing had torn open part of the hull, exposing wires and circuits unlike anything he'd ever seen. Sparks occasionally shot out from the exposed panels, but Jake didn't seem bothered. If anything, he looked thrilled. "This is incredible," he said aloud, running his fingers over the alien metal. "Do you have any idea what this could mean for us, for Earth?" Matt Owens approached cautiously, his rifle slung across his back. "You're telling me you understand any of this?" he asked, gesturing to the complicated machinery. "Not yet," Jake admitted, grinning. "But I will. Give me some time and I'll figure it out. This tech, it's way beyond anything we've got. Imagine what we could do with it." Matt raised an eyebrow. "Or imagine what kind of trouble we could get into." Jake shrugged. "Trouble's already here, isn't it? Might as well make the most of it." As Jake continued poking around the ship, others began cleaning up the mess. Sarah Bennett tended to the injured, moving between makeshift beds set up in the town hall. Her bag of medical supplies was nearly empty, but she worked tirelessly, stitching wounds and comforting those in pain. Emily stayed close to her, fetching water or holding hands when someone needed reassurance. "It's okay," Emily told a young boy who had been caught in the crossfire. His leg was bandaged, and tears streamed down his face. "You're safe now. We beat them." The boy sniffled, but managed a weak smile. "Really? We did?" "Yeah," Emily said proudly. "We showed them they messed with the wrong place." Elsewhere, settlers gathered in small groups, talking quietly about what had happened. Some laughed nervously, sharing stories of close calls and lucky breaks. Others stared silently at the ground, processing the weight of what they had survived. No one knew exactly what to feel. Relief, pride, fear, anger, all of it swirled together in an emotional storm. Commander Cale sat apart from his soldiers, his posture rigid and unyielding despite his defeat. His helmet had been removed, revealing a face that was both human-like and alien. His features were sharp, almost carved from stone, and his eyes glowed faintly with an unnatural light. John approached him cautiously, the artifact held loosely in his hand. "You underestimated us," John said, his tone steady. "Why?" Cale didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and mechanical, devoid of emotion. "Your species is primitive, weak. You lack unity, discipline, purpose. My orders were clear. Test your defenses. Prove your insignificance. And instead you proved ours," John countered. "We may not have your weapons or your ships, but we've got something better, each other." Cale's glowing eyes flickered, as if considering John's words. Then he looked away, his expression unreadable. "This changes nothing. The Empire will not tolerate failure. Reinforcements will arrive. Your victory today means only delay." John clenched his jaw, knowing Cale was right. But instead of feeling defeated, he felt a surge of determination. "Then we'll be ready," he said firmly. "Next time we won't just defend ourselves, we'll fight back." Kyle said nothing more, but the tension in the air was palpable. The settlers kept a close watch on the prisoners, knowing they couldn't afford to let their guard down. For now, the immediate threat was neutralized, but everyone understood that this was only the beginning. As night fell, the townsfolk lit fires to ward off the darkness. The glow of the flames illuminated weary faces, but there was also a sense of camaraderie, a shared bond forged in the heat of battle. People hugged each other, exchanged stories, and offered words of gratitude. Even those who had always kept to themselves now found comfort in the company of their neighbors. John climbed onto the steps of the town hall, raising his arms to get everyone's attention. "Listen up," he called out, his voice carrying over the murmurs of conversation. "Today we proved something important, not just to them but to ourselves. We proved that no matter how big the enemy, no matter how hopeless things seem, we can win if we stick together." A cheer went up from the crowd, echoing across the ruined settlement. John waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "But we can't stop here. They'll be back, and next time we need to be stronger, smarter, better prepared. Tomorrow we start rebuilding, not just our homes but our defenses. We protect this place no matter what it takes." The settlers nodded in agreement, their resolve strengthening with every word. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they weren't alone. Together they had faced the impossible and triumphed. Far above, the remnants of the Verne warship lingered, sending urgent messages back to the Empire. Reports of the failed invasion would reach high-ranking officials soon, and plans for retaliation would begin. But for now, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as news of humanity's unexpected resistance spread. Willow Creek might have been small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but its victory had sent shockwaves through the stars. And as the settlers gathered around their campfires, singing songs and sharing laughter, they carried with them the knowledge that they had changed the course of history, not with weapons or armies, but with courage, ingenuity, and an unshakable belief in the power of unity. The days that followed the battle were a blur of activity for the people of Willow Creek. The settlers worked tirelessly to clean up the wreckage, repair their homes, and prepare for whatever might come next. Though the immediate threat had passed, the reality of the situation weighed heavily on everyone's minds. The Vern weren't gone, they were regrouping. And when they returned, they would bring reinforcements, more advanced weapons, and a thirst for revenge. John Harper spent much of his time organizing the townsfolk, turning their small community into something resembling a fortress. With Jake's electromagnetic device and the mysterious alien artifact as inspiration, he encouraged everyone to think creatively about defense. Farmers repurposed old farming equipment into makeshift barricades, while mechanics like Jake experimented with new ways to enhance their weapons. Even children pitched in, gathering scrap metal and helping stack supplies. Jake became something of a local hero, spending long hours tinkering with the damaged alien ship. He dismantled parts of it carefully, studying its inner workings and trying to understand how it functioned. The artifact continued to hum softly whenever he touched it, offering glimpses of strange diagrams and symbols in his mind. Though he couldn't fully decipher them, he began to piece together some basic principles of the alien technology. "This is incredible," Jake muttered one evening, holding up a glowing shard of metal he'd salvaged from the ship. "If we can figure out how to replicate this energy source, we could power our entire town, and maybe even build defenses strong enough to hold off another attack." Matt Owens, who had taken on the role of lookout, leaned against the garage door and raised an eyebrow. "You really think we can turn their own tech against them?" "We don't have a choice," Jake replied, his voice firm. "They're coming back, Matt, and next time they won't underestimate us. We need every advantage we can get." While Jake focused on technology, others worked on practical solutions. Sarah Bennett set up a medical station in the town hall, stocking it with bandages, antiseptics, and painkillers scavenged from nearby settlements. She taught Emily and a few other teenagers basic first aid, knowing they might need all the help they could get during future battles. Laura Harper organized food distribution, ensuring that no one went hungry despite the destruction of several grain silos. Everyone had a role to play, and no task was too small. Commander Kyle and his remaining soldiers remained prisoners, guarded around the clock by volunteers armed with rifles and pitchforks. The settlers debated what to do with them. Some wanted to execute the invaders outright, while others argued they should be kept alive as bargaining chips. In the end, John decided to leave the decision to higher authorities, assuming help would eventually arrive. For now, the Vern were locked inside a makeshift cell constructed from reinforced steel beams and barbed wire. As word of the battle spread, reporters and scientists began arriving in Willow Creek, eager to document the story of how a tiny settlement had repelled an interstellar invasion. Helicopters buzzed overhead, and trucks filled with equipment rolled down the dirt roads leading into town. At first, the settlers were wary of outsiders, but John assured them that sharing their story was important, not just for Willow Creek, but for the entire planet. "They need to know what happened here," John told Laura one night as they sat on the porch of their farmhouse, watching the stars twinkle above. "If we keep this quiet, no one will be ready when the Vern come back." Laura nodded, though her expression was troubled. "Do you think anyone will believe us? They'll probably say we're crazy." "They'll believe us," John said firmly, "because we've got proof. That ship, the artifact, the prisoners, all of it proves we're not making this up." Sure enough, the arrival of experts confirmed the settlers' claims. Scientists examined the alien technology, marveling at its complexity and potential applications. Military officials questioned John and the others about the battle, taking detailed notes and promising to send reinforcements. Reporters interviewed everyone from Jake to Emily, capturing their stories on camera and broadcasting them across the country. Willow Creek became a symbol of hope, a testament to humanity's ability to overcome even the most daunting challenges. But fame came with complications. As news crews flooded the settlement, the once quiet town found itself thrust into the spotlight. Strangers wandered the streets, snapping photos and asking endless questions. Some settlers welcomed the attention, seeing it as an opportunity to share their message of unity and resilience. Others resented the intrusion, longing for the peace and simplicity they had known before the invasion. Despite the chaos, life slowly began to return to normal, or at least as normal as it could be under the circumstances. Crops were replanted, buildings repaired, and routines re-established. The settlers took comfort in their shared experiences, drawing strength from the bonds they had formed during the battle. They knew they couldn't erase what had happened, but they could choose how to move forward. One evening, as the sun dipped, below the horizon, John gathered the townsfolk in the center of Willow Creek. A large bonfire crackled in the middle of the clearing, casting flickering shadows across the faces of those gathered around it. The mood was somber, yet hopeful, mix of reflection and determination. "I want to thank all of you," John began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "What we did here wasn't just about protecting our homes or our families. It was about proving that we're stronger than anyone gives us credit for. Stronger than fear, stronger than despair, stronger than anything that tries to break us." The crowd erupted into applause, cheers echoing through the night. John waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "But let's not forget why we're still standing. It wasn't because of me or Jake or any one person. It was because of all of us. Because we worked together, trusted each other, and refused to give up. That's the lesson we take from this. Not just for today, but for tomorrow and every day after that." Tears glistened in Laura's eyes as she listened to her husband speak. Beside her, Emily clung to her arm, pride swelling in her chest. Jake stood near the fire, nodding along with John's words while Matt adjusted his glasses, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Even Sarah, usually so reserved, allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, wiping away a tear as she looked around at the people she now considered family. Far above, in the depths of space, the Vern Empire seethed with rage. News of the failed invasion reached high-ranking officials, sparking outrage and demands for retaliation. Plans were drawn up, fleets mobilized, and strategies devised. But for now, Earth remained safe, thanks to the courage of those who had faced the impossible and won. And so, the legend of Willow Creek lived on, a reminder that even the smallest, weakest settlement could stand tall when its people refused to back down. It wasn't about weapons or armor. It was about heart, about love, about the unshakable belief that no matter how powerful the enemy, unity and determination could overcome anything.